Jake Miller wiped his greasy hands on his work shirt and looked up at the massive alien ship floating in space. The thing was huge, bigger than 3 city blocks put together. Its surface shined like glass, and strange blue lights moved across it like water. Jake had never seen anything like it before. Nobody on Earth had. "Stay close to me," Captain Ben Rodriguez said to his team. "And remember, we're here to make friends, not enemies." Jake nodded along with the others. Dr. Lisa Chang stood next, to him, holding her translation device. She looked nervous. Jake didn't blame her. They were the first humans to ever meet aliens, real aliens, the kind that built ships that could cross the galaxy in weeks instead of years. The airlock opened with a soft hiss. Jake stepped through and felt his boots touch alien metal. The hallway was tall, really tall. The ceiling was at least 15 feet high. Everything was smooth and white, with those same blue lights running along the walls like veins. "Welcome to the Stellar Harmony," a voice said. Jake looked around and saw her. The alien princess. She was tall, maybe 8 feet, with skin that looked like it was made of pale crystal. Her hair was silver and seemed to move on its own. Her eyes were completely blue, no white parts at all. "I am Princess Lyra Lai of the Zephyrian Empire," she said. Her voice was cold. "You are the humans, I assume?" Captain Rodriguez stepped forward. "Yes, Your Highness. I'm Captain Ben Rodriguez. This is Dr. Lisa Chang and Jake Miller. We're honored to meet you." Princess Lyra Lai looked at them like they were bugs. "Honored? Yes, I'm sure you are." She turned and started walking. "Follow me. The Emperor wants to see what you primitives are capable of." Jake felt his jaw tighten. Primitives. He'd built engines that could push ships to near light speed. He'd fixed computers that could calculate jump coordinates to anywhere in known space. But to her, he was just a primitive. They walked through corridors that seemed to go on forever. Other aliens moved past them, all tall, all with that same crystal-like skin. They stared at the humans like they were animals in a zoo. "Your species has only just discovered faster-than-light travel," Princess Lyra Lai said without looking back. "Most species take thousands of years to develop such technology. You did it in less than 500. Curious." "We're fast learners," Jake said. The princess stopped and turned, her blue eyes focused on him. "Fast learners? How amusing." She smiled, but it wasn't friendly. "We shall see about that." They entered a massive chamber. Jake's eyes went wide. In the center of the room sat the most beautiful ship he had ever seen. It was sleek and curved, like it had been grown instead of built. It was black as space itself, but when the light hit it right, it showed colors that had no names. Purple, green, gold, all swirling together. "This is the Void Dancer," Princess Lyra Lai said with pride in her voice. "The most advanced vessel in the galaxy. It requires perfect coordination of mind, body, and spirit to operate. Only the most brilliant minds in the Empire can even attempt to fly it." Jake walked closer to the ship. It was maybe 50 feet long, with wings that curved like a bird's. There were no visible engines, no obvious weapons. It looked more like art than a machine. "How does it work?" Dr. Chang asked. "The ship connects directly to the pilot's mind," Princess Lyra Lai explained. "It reads thoughts, emotions, intentions. The pilot must calculate thousands of variables instantly while maintaining perfect mental balance. One mistake, one moment of doubt, and the ship becomes impossible to control." Jake reached out to touch the ship's hull. It was warm and seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. "Don't touch that!" Princess Lyra Lai snapped. "That vessel is worth more than your entire planet." Jake pulled his hand back, but he kept studying the ship. There were tiny symbols carved into the hull. They moved and shifted as he watched. The whole thing hummed with energy he could feel in his bones. "Only geniuses of the highest order could ever hope to fly this ship," Princess Lyra Lai continued. "It took our best pilots months of training to even start the engines. Some never master it at all." "Interesting design," Jake said quietly. Princess Lyra Lai laughed. It was not a nice sound. "Design? You think you understand our technology? Humans probably still use primitive combustion engines for your atmospheric craft." "Actually, we stopped using those about 200 years ago," Jake replied. "But I get your point." The princess stepped closer to him. Do you? Do you really? Look around you, human. This station alone contains more advanced technology than your species has ever dreamed of. We have conquered death, bent space and time to our will, created ships that can travel between dimensions. And you are barely more than children, playing with fire. Captain Rodriguez put a warning hand on Jake's shoulder, but Jake ignored it. He was still looking at the Void Dancer. The more he studied it, the more familiar it seemed. Not the technology, but the principles, the way the energy flowed, the balance of the design. Mind if I take a look under the hood? Jake asked. The chamber went quiet. Every alien in the room stared at him. Princess Lyrelai's blue eyes grew wide with shock, then narrow with anger. Under the hood, she repeated slowly. You know, the engine compartment, the guts of the thing. I'm a mechanic. It's what I do. Princess Lyrelai's crystal skin actually changed color, going from pale to a deep purple. You want to examine the Void Dancer? You, a primitive from a backwater world that has barely learned to leave its own solar system? Well, when you put it like that, it sounds pretty crazy, Jake admitted. But yeah, I'd like to see how it works. The princess looked at him for a long moment. Then she threw back her head and laughed. It echoed through the chamber like breaking glass. By all means, she said when she stopped laughing. Look all you want. Perhaps when you realize how far beyond your understanding it is, your species will finally accept its proper place in the galactic order. Jake nodded and walked toward the ship. He had no idea what he was getting himself into. But that had never stopped him before. Jake ran his hands along the side of the Void Dancer. The ship's surface felt alive under his fingers, warm, smooth, and humming with energy. He could feel vibrations that reminded him of the old turbine engines back on Earth, but different, more complex. Careful, human, Princess Lyrelai said from behind him. That ship cost more resources than your planet produces in a decade. Jake ignored her and kept looking. There had to be access panels somewhere. Every ship had them, even alien ones. He found what looked like a seam in the hull and pressed on it. Nothing happened. Looking for maintenance access? A voice said beside him. Jake turned to see an older alien approaching. This one was different from the others. His crystal skin was darker, almost gray, and marked with lines like old scars. His blue eyes were softer, more curious than cold. I'm Zarthul, the alien said. I designed this vessel. Jake Miller, Jake replied, offering his hand. Zarthul looked at it strangely, then reached out with his own long-fingered hand. Jake shook it gently. You built this? Jake asked, looking back at the ship with new respect. Built is not the right word. We grew it, shaped it, convinced it to exist. Zarthul touched a different part of the hull, and a section slid away silently. But yes, it came from my mind originally. Jake leaned forward to look inside. What he saw made no sense. Instead of wires and circuits, there were things that looked like veins. They pulsed with soft light and seemed to be alive. In the center was something that might have been a brain, if brains were made of crystal and light. It's biological, Jake said. Partially, Zarthul confirmed. The ship is part machine, part living creature, part pure thought. It requires a pilot who can think in harmony with its mind. Princess Lyrelai moved closer. Which is impossible for your species, she said firmly. Humans lack the telepathic abilities necessary to interface with the ship's consciousness. Jake studied the organic circuits. They reminded him of something, but he couldn't put his finger on what. So the ship thinks? It dreams, Zarthul said. It dreams of flying through space, of dancing between stars. The pilot must join that dream and guide it without disrupting it. Like flying by instinct, Jake murmured. More than instinct. True harmony requires, Hey, Jake! A voice called out. Jake turned to see his best friend, Tony Blake, jogging across the chamber. Tony was carrying a toolbox that looked tiny in the massive alien space. Tony, what are you doing here? Captain Rodriguez sent me when he heard you were poking around alien tech, Tony said with a grin. Figured you might need someone to hold your tools while you break the most expensive ship in the galaxy. Princess Lyrelai made a sound like an angry cat. Another primitive? This is intolerable. But Zarthul seemed interested. You are also a shipbuilder? Engineer, Tony said. I work with Jake fixing anything that flies, floats, or explodes, usually all three at the same time. Jake had an idea. Tony, remember that old flight simulator back at the academy? The one that crashed every time someone tried to use the advanced modes? The nightmare machine? Yeah, why? What did we do to fix it? Tony thought for a moment. We stopped trying to fight it and started working with it. Instead of forcing it to do what we wanted, we learned to do what it wanted. Exactly. Jake looked back at the ship's organic brain. This isn't about controlling the ship. It's about understanding it. Zarthul's eyes widened. That is not an incorrect assessment. Princess Lyrelay stepped between them. Understanding requires telepathic contact with the ship's consciousness. Humans do not possess this ability. It is biologically impossible for your species. Jake opened his toolbox and pulled out a scanner. It was old Earth tech, nothing fancy, but it could. Red energy patterns. He pointed it at the ship's brain and watched the display. The patterns were chaotic, swirling, changing, never the same twice. But there was something familiar about the chaos. It reminded him of jazz music, or the way flocks of birds moved through the sky, random but with hidden rules. It's not telepathy, Jake said slowly. It's pattern recognition. What? Princess Lyrelay demanded. Jake showed her the scanner display. Look at these energy readings. They seem random, but they're not. There's a pattern underneath, like improvisational music. The ship isn't looking for someone to control it. It's looking for someone who can improvise with it. Tony looked at the display and whistled. It's like that old chaos theory stuff from college. The butterfly effect and all that. Exactly, Jake said, getting excited. The ship doesn't need a telepath. It needs someone who can think on their feet, someone who can adapt and change and roll with whatever happens. Zarthul was studying the scanner reading. This device should not be able to interpret our bio-neural matrices. It's reading energy patterns, Jake explained. Same basic physics, just different tech. Impossible, Princess Lyrelay said, but she sounded less certain than before. Jake was already deep in the ship's systems, following the organic circuits with his eyes and tools. Each section seemed to serve a different function. Navigation, propulsion, life support, but all connected like parts of a single living thing. Tony, this is incredible, Jake said. It's like they built a ship that thinks like a pilot instead of making the pilot think like a ship. That's the basic principle, yes, Zarthul admitted. But the mental synchronization required. What if it's not mental? Jake interrupted. What if it's emotional or instinctive? He pulled out another tool and connected it to one of the organic circuits. The ship's humming changed pitch slightly. Jake felt a strange sensation, like something was gently touching his thoughts. Jake, Tony said nervously, your scanner just went crazy. Jake looked at the display. The energy patterns were shifting, becoming more organized. Still chaotic, but in a way that made sense to him somehow. It's responding to you, Zarthul said in amazement. But how? You have no telepathic abilities. Maybe I don't need them, Jake said. He could feel the ship now, like a sleeping animal that had just noticed he was there. It wasn't hostile, just curious. It's not about reading minds. It's about reading intentions. Princess Lyrelay grabbed his arm. Stop this immediately. You're contaminating the ship's consciousness with primitive thought patterns. But Jake barely heard her. He was too busy listening to the ship. Not with his ears, but with some part of his mind he'd never used before. The ship was asking him questions without words. Who are you? What do you want? Can you fly? Yeah, Jake whispered. I can fly. The ship's humming grew louder, more excited. The lights in the chamber flickered as energy flowed through systems that hadn't been active in months. Shut it down, Princess Lyrelay commanded. Shut it down now. But Zarthul held up a hand to stop her. His old eyes were bright with wonder. No, he said softly. Let's see what happens. Word spread fast through the alien space station. Within hours, everyone knew about the human who had somehow connected with the Void Dancer. Jake found himself surrounded by curious aliens wherever he went. Some seemed amazed. Others looked worried. Princess Lyrelay just looked angry. This changes nothing, she announced to a gathering of Zephyrian officers. Touching the ship's systems is not the same as flying it. The human will fail spectacularly when he attempts the trial course. But Jake wasn't thinking about failing. He was thinking about flying. Amy Chen arrived on the next transport from the human diplomatic ship. She was Jake's old flight instructor, the woman who had taught him to fly everything from ancient airplanes to modern space fighters. She took one look at the Void Dancer and shook her head. "Jake, what have you gotten yourself into this time?" she asked. "Something interesting," Jake replied. He was sitting cross-legged next to the ship, his hands resting on its hull. The connection was getting stronger each hour. He could feel the ship's moods now. Right now it felt eager, like a racehorse waiting for the starting gate to open. "The princess challenged me to fly it," Jake explained. "If I succeed, humanity gets treated as an equal species. If I fail, you crash the most advanced ship in the galaxy and probably start an interstellar war," Amy finished. "Sounds about right for you." Tony was lying on his back under the ship, studying its underside with every scanner they had. "Amy, you need to see this," he called out. "The whole thing is designed like a nervous system. Every part talks to every other part instantly." Amy crawled under the ship next to Tony. "It's like flying a living creature," she said after a moment. "That's exactly what it is," Jake said. "The ship doesn't want to be controlled. It wants to be partnered with." Zarthul approached, carrying a small device that looked like a crystal tablet. "I have been reviewing the ship's diagnostic data," he said. "Your neural pattern is unlike anything in our records. Where our pilots seek to dominate the ship's consciousness, you seem to be negotiating with it." "Negotiating?" Jake asked. "You treat it as an equal rather than a tool. This is unusual." Princess Lyrelei appeared beside them. "It's also irrelevant," she said coldly. "Tomorrow you will attempt the trial course. It consists of navigating through an asteroid field while avoiding gravity wells and temporal distortions. No pilot has ever completed it on their first attempt. Most take months of training." Jake stood up and brushed dust off his pants. "What kind of temporal distortions?" "Time moves differently in certain areas," Zarthul explained. "A few seconds outside might be minutes inside, or vice versa. The pilot must adjust constantly while maintaining perfect speed and trajectory." "Sounds like flying through a thunderstorm back home," Jake said. "You can't predict it, so you just adapt as it happens." Princess Lyrelei's crystal skin darkened with frustration. "This is not weather, human. These are fundamental forces of physics being manipulated by technology beyond your comprehension." "Sure," Jake agreed. "But flying is flying." That night, Amy set up a simulation program on their portable computer. It wasn't nearly as advanced as the alien systems, but it could mimic basic flight patterns and obstacles. "Let's start with something simple," Amy said. "Basic navigation through moving objects." Jake put on the old VR headset they'd brought from Earth. The simulation started, and immediately he was flying through a field of spinning asteroids. He moved smoothly between them, treating each rock like it was just another part of a complex. "Dance. Too easy," he said after completing the course. Amy made it harder. More asteroids, moving faster in more complex patterns. Jake adapted instantly, finding paths where others would see only walls. "Now with gravity wells," Amy said, adding invisible forces that could pull a ship off course without warning. Jake felt the simulated ship being tugged in different directions. Instead of fighting it, he used the gravity to change direction faster than normal engines could manage. He turned obstacles into advantages. "This is actually fun," he said, spinning through a particularly tricky section. Princess Lyrelei had been watching from across the chamber. Now she approached with several other aliens following her. "Your primitive simulation cannot possibly prepare you for the real thing," she said. "The trial course uses actual temporal distortions. Time itself becomes unstable." "What does that feel like?" Jake asked, pulling off the headset. "Like being drunk, dizzy, and losing your memory all at the same time," one of the alien pilots said. "Most pilots panic the first time it happens." Jake nodded thoughtfully. "So the trick is not to panic." "The trick," Princess Lyrelei said with a nasty smile, "is impossible for your species." When Jake wasn't looking, she made changes to the simulation. She added gravity fields that appeared without warning. She increased the temporal distortions to levels that would be found in the most dangerous parts of space. She made the course 10 times harder than anything the real trial would throw at him. Jake put the headset back on and started the modified simulation. Within seconds, everything went crazy. Asteroids appeared and disappeared. Gravity pulled him in 12 directions, at once. Time moved like thick honey, then like lightning. "Jake, something's wrong with the program," Amy said, looking at the error messages flooding her screen. But Jake was laughing inside the simulation. "This is great! It's like flying through a blender in a tornado during an earthquake." He didn't try to predict the chaos. He didn't try to control it. He just rode it like a surfer riding a wave. When gravity pulled him left, he went left and used the momentum to dodge right when the next field appeared. When time slowed down, he used the extra seconds to plan. When it sped up, he trusted his instincts to react. He completed the impossible. Simulation in record time. Princess Lyrelei stared at the results with her mouth open. "That should have been fatal," she whispered. "Nah," Jake said, pulling off the headset. "Just challenging. Remind me to thank whoever made it harder. The real thing should feel easy now." Zarthul was studying the simulation data. "According to this, you experienced forces that should have torn your ship apart. How did you survive?" "I stopped trying to fight it and started dancing with it," Jake explained. "You can't control chaos, but you can work with it." Amy looked at the simulation recordings and shook her head. "Jake, half the things you did in there shouldn't be physically possible." "Maybe they're not," Jake said with a grin. "But they worked. Anyway." Princess Lyrelei's hands were shaking with rage. "Tomorrow you will face the real trial. No simulations, no safety nets, just you, the ship, and forces that have destroyed better pilots than you could ever dream of becoming." Jake stretched and yawned. "Sounds good. What time do we start?" The aliens looked at each other in confusion. This human was either incredibly brave or completely insane. Possibly both. "Dawn," Princess Lyrelei said finally. "Great. I'll be there." Jake patted the Void Dancer's hull affectionately. "We'll be ready, won't we, girl?" The ship hummed softly in response, and every alien in the chamber felt a chill run down their spine. The launch bay was packed. Aliens from dozens of different species had come to watch. Jake could see tall, thin beings with too many arms standing next to short, round creatures covered in fur. In the viewing area above, Ambassador Hythal from the Cosmic Assembly sat next to General Fluxara, the highest-ranking Zephyrian military officer on the station. "No pressure," Tony said, helping Jake into the flight suit the aliens had provided. It was made of some kind of metal fabric that felt like liquid silk. "There's always pressure," Jake replied, checking the suit's systems. "The trick is not to let it get to you." Rick Torres, their communications officer, was setting up recording equipment. "Jake, you know this is being broadcast to every human colony, right? If you pull this off, you'll be famous. And if I crash, I'll be dead," Jake pointed out. "Fame won't matter much then." Amy walked over with a serious expression. "Jake, I've been studying the course data. The temporal distortions are worse than we thought. Some of them can trap a ship for hours while only seconds pass outside." "Then I won't get trapped," Jake said simply. Princess Lyrelei approached with a group of Zephyrian officials. She was wearing formal robes that sparkled like starlight. "Human," she announced loudly, "you have one final chance to withdraw from this challenge. No shame will come to your species if you admit that this task is beyond your capabilities." Jake looked at her for a moment, then at the Void Dancer. The ship was beautiful in the morning light, its black surface reflecting colors he couldn't name. He could feel it waiting for him, eager to fly. "Thanks for the offer," he said. "But I didn't come this far just to back down now." The princess's eyes narrowed. "So be it. But remember, when you fail, your species will accept its proper place in the galactic hierarchy." "And when I succeed?" Jake asked. "You won't," she said coldly. Zarthul walked over carrying a small crystal device. "This will monitor the ship's vital signs during the flight," he explained. "If anything goes wrong, we can pull you out remotely." Jake clipped the device to his suit. "How many pilots have needed to be pulled out?" "All of them, on their first attempt," Zarthul admitted. "The longest anyone lasted was 7 minutes. How long is the full course?" 15 minutes for a perfect run. The record is 23 minutes, set by our best pilot after 2 years of training." Jake nodded and walked toward the Void Dancer. As he approached, the ship's hull rippled, and an opening appeared. The cockpit was unlike anything he'd ever seen. Instead of seats and controls, there was a cocoon-like chamber filled with soft, glowing material. "You lie down in the neural interface," Princess Lyrelai explained with obvious satisfaction. "The ship will read your thoughts directly. If your mind is too primitive to handle the connection, the feedback will render you unconscious within seconds." Jake climbed into the chamber. The moment his body touched the soft material, everything changed. He could feel the ship's presence in his mind, vast and alien but not unfriendly. It was like having a conversation without words. "Hello," the ship seemed to say. "Hey there," Jake thought back. "Ready to show these folks how it's done?" The ship's response felt like laughter. "Yes." The chamber closed around Jake, but instead of feeling trapped, he felt free. He could sense everything around the ship. The asteroid field waiting ahead, full of spinning rocks and hidden dangers. The gravity wells that could crush a careless pilot. The temporal distortions that made time bend and twist. "Course sensors show all systems active," Rick's voice came through the communication system. "Jake, can you hear us?" "Loud and clear," Jake replied. His voice sounded strange to his own ears, like it was coming from somewhere far away. "Ship feels good. We're ready to go." "Beginning course countdown," General Fluxera announced. "All safety systems active. Emergency retrieval standing by." Princess Lyrelai's voice cut through the chatter. "Remember, human, this course has defeated every pilot who ever attempted it on their first try. Do not let your primitive confidence blind you to the reality of your limitations." Jake didn't respond. He was too busy listening to the ship. It was showing him the course, not through his eyes, but through some deeper sense. He could feel the pattern of the obstacles, the rhythm of the dangers ahead. 3, the countdown began. 2, 1, launch. The Void Dancer shot forward like a bullet. Jake felt the acceleration in every cell of his body, but it didn't hurt. It felt like coming alive. The ship moved through space like it was swimming. Through water, smooth and natural. The first asteroid field appeared ahead. Massive rocks spinning in complex patterns, some as big as buildings. A normal pilot would have to calculate trajectories and speeds, plot a careful course through the gaps. Jake did something different. He felt the rhythm of the spinning rocks and joined it. The ship danced between them, moving like it was part of their pattern instead of trying to fight through it. "Impossible," he heard Princess Lyrelai whisper over the communications. "He's moving too fast. No one can navigate that field at that speed." But Jake wasn't navigating. He was flowing. The ship showed him where to go by feeling the currents of space and gravity. When a gap appeared, they flowed through it. When a rock blocked their path, they spun around it like water flowing around a stone. The first gravity well loomed ahead. It was invisible to the eye, but Jake could feel it like a hole in the universe. Most pilots would try to avoid it completely. Instead, Jake aimed straight for it. "He's lost his mind," someone said over the communications. "That gravity well will tear him apart." Jake hit the edge of the gravity well and let it grab the ship. Instead of fighting the pull, he used it like a slingshot. The ship whipped around the invisible mass and shot out the other side twice as fast as before. "Unbelievable," Rick's voice was full of excitement. "Jake just used a gravity well to gain speed. I've never seen anything like it." The temporal distortions came next. Areas where time moved like thick honey or raced like lightning. Jake felt the ship's perception change as they entered the first one. Everything around them slowed, to a crawl. But his thoughts remained clear. Instead of panicking, he used the extra time to study the course ahead. When time snapped back to normal speed, he was ready for every obstacle. Another distortion made time race forward. Jake found himself moving through a section of the course in what felt like seconds, but he didn't try to slow down or regain control. He let the acceleration carry him forward and used the momentum to tackle the next section. "Current time, 8 minutes, General Fluxera announced, his voice full of disbelief. "The human has just passed the halfway point." Jake could hear excited chatter from the viewing areas. He caught fragments of conversation from dozens of different species. "Amazing. Impossible. How is he doing that?" But Jake tuned it all out. He was completely focused on flying. The ship was singing now, a harmony of joy and speed and perfect motion. Together, they moved through obstacles that should have been impossible to survive. The final section appeared ahead, a maze of asteroids, Gravity wells and temporal distortions all mixed together. It was chaos in its purest form, the kind of challenge that would break most minds just by looking at it. Jake smiled and dove straight in. He stopped trying to understand what was happening, and just let it happen. When gravity pulled him left, he went left. When time slowed down, he slowed down with it. When an asteroid appeared out of nowhere, he was already turning to avoid it. The ship and pilot moved as one, no longer two separate beings, but a single entity that existed purely to fly. They spun through impossible spaces, surfed gravity waves that shouldn't exist, and danced with time itself. And then suddenly, they were through. The finish line appeared ahead, marked by two towering beacons. Jake crossed it and let the ship's speed naturally decrease as they entered open space on the other side. Time, General Fluxera announced in a stunned voice. 11 minutes, 47 seconds. The communication channel exploded with noise. Cheers, gasps, excited alien languages all mixing together. But through it all, Jake could hear Princess Lyralay's voice, quiet and shocked. "Impossible," she whispered. "No one flies that course in under 12 minutes. No one." Jake brought the Void Dancer around in a gentle arc and headed back toward the station. "Well," he said over the communication system, "I guess there's a first time for everything." As the ship docked, Jake could see crowds of aliens pressed against every viewing window. They were all staring at him like he was some kind of miracle. Maybe he was. Jake climbed out of the Void Dancer, feeling like he'd just woken up from the best dream of his life. His legs were shaky, and his head was buzzing with leftover sensations from the neural connection. But he was grinning like an idiot. The launch bay had erupted into chaos. Aliens from dozens of species were shouting in languages Jake didn't understand, but their excitement was clear enough. Camera drones buzzed around his head, recording every moment for broadcast across the galaxy. Kate Murphy, a reporter from Earth News Network, pushed through the crowd with her microphone. Jake Miller, how does it feel to be the first human to master alien technology that their own creators said was impossible?" "Feels pretty good," Jake said, still grinning. "Though I think the ship did most of the work." Princess Lyralay stood at the edge of the crowd, her crystal skin pale and her blue eyes wide with shock. She looked like someone had just told her the laws of physics were optional. "This is impossible," she kept saying to anyone who would listen. "The course record was 23 minutes. No one completes it under 15 on their first attempt. No one." Zarthul approached Jake with something that might have been respect in his ancient eyes. "I have designed ships for 300 years, he said quietly. "I thought I understood the limits of what was possible. Today you showed me I was wrong." "I just flew the ship the way it wanted to be flown," Jake replied. "That is exactly why it worked," Zarthul said. "Every other pilot tries to impose their will on the vessel. You partnered with it instead." Tony and Amy pushed through the crowd to reach Jake. Tony was carrying a portable scanner that was beeping wildly. "Jake, you need to see this," Tony said, excitedly. "I recorded your entire flight, the energy patterns, the neural connections, everything." Amy looked at the scanner data and shook her head. "According to this, you and the ship were operating as a single entity for most of the flight. I've never seen anything like it." "That's because it's never happened before," a new voice said. Everyone turned to see Emperor Zixthul himself approaching. The supreme ruler of the Zephyrian Empire was even taller than the others, with skin that seemed to be made of living starlight. His presence made the entire bay fall silent. "Your Imperial Majesty," Princess Lyralay said quickly, dropping to one knee. "I can explain." "There is nothing to explain, niece," the Emperor said calmly. "Today we witnessed something unprecedented. This human has accomplished what our finest pilots cannot do." He turned to Jake. "Tell me, how did you know the ship's mind so quickly?" Jake thought about it for a moment. "I didn't try to know it," he said finally. "I just listened to it, like having a conversation with a friend." "A friend," the Emperor repeated thoughtfully. "We train our pilots to dominate the ship's consciousness. You chose to communicate with it instead." "Seemed like the polite thing to do," Jake said. The Emperor actually smiled. "Indeed." Rick Torres was still recording everything, and his camera caught the moment when Princess Lyralay finally approached Jake. Her royal composure was completely gone. She looked confused, humbled, and maybe a little frightened. "I do not understand," she said quietly. "How can a primitive species accomplish what we cannot?" "Maybe we're not as primitive as you thought," Jake replied. "And maybe you're not as advanced as you believed." Instead of getting angry, the princess nodded slowly. "Perhaps you are correct. We assumed that our way was the only way. Today you proved that assumption wrong." Ambassador Hythal from the Cosmic Assembly descended from the viewing area with a formal document in his hands. "By the authority vested in me by the Galactic Council," he announced, "I hereby recognize the human species as a full member of the galactic community with all rights and privileges therein." The crowd erupted in cheers. Jake found himself being lifted onto shoulders and passed around like a trophy. It was overwhelming, but in a good way. Later, after the crowds had cleared and the reporters had gone home, Jake sat alone with the Void Dancer in the quiet launch bay. The ship hummed softly like a cat purring. "Thanks, girl," he said, patting her hull. "That was quite a ride." The ship's response was a feeling of warmth and contentment. They had flown together, and it had been perfect. Commander Nova Singh from Earth Fleet found him there an hour later. She was a tough woman who had served in the colonial wars, and she didn't smile often. But she was smiling now. "Jake Miller," she said, "you just opened diplomatic doors that we've been trying to unlock for decades. Every major species in the galaxy wants to meet the humans now." "That's nice," Jake said, "but I think I'm ready to go home." "Home?" "Jake, you could have your pick of assignments. Any ship in the fleet, any position you want. You're probably the most famous human alive right now." Jake looked at the Void Dancer one more time, then back at Commander Singh. "I appreciate the offer, but I've got a workshop back on Earth Colony 7. Neighborhood kids come by after school to learn about engines and flying. That's what I want to get back to." Commander Singh shook her head in amazement. "Most people would kill for the opportunities you just earned." "Most people didn't get to fly this ship," Jake replied. "After dancing with something this beautiful, everything else seems kind of ordinary." But even as he said it, Jake knew that wasn't true. Every ship had its own personality, its own way of flying. He was looking forward to getting to know them. All. 3 days later, Jake was packing his tools when Princess Lyrelay came to see him off. She looked different somehow. Less arrogant, more thoughtful. "I owe you an apology," she said formally. "I misjudged your species and you personally. That was unbecoming of me." "No harm done," Jake said. "Though you might want to work on that whole primitive species thing. It's not a great way to make friends." The princess actually laughed. "Noted. I have spoken with the Emperor. We would like to invite human pilots to train with our academy. Perhaps we can learn from each other." "That sounds like a good idea," Jake agreed. "There is one more thing," she said hesitantly. "The Void Dancer has been asking for you." Jake looked up from his packing. "Asking for me?" "She won't fly for anyone else now. Our best pilots have tried, but she just sits there. We think she's bonded to you somehow." Jake felt a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the ship's neural connection. "She's a good ship. She deserves to fly." "Then perhaps you will return someday?" Jake shouldered his tool bag and headed for the transport ship that would take him home. "Maybe I will," he said. "But first I've got some kids to teach about flying." As his transport pulled away from the station, Jake could see the Void Dancer through the viewport, sitting alone in her launch bay. He pressed his hand to the window and felt, just for a moment, an echo of their connection. "Next time," he promised, softly. Back on Earth Colony 7, Jake returned to his workshop behind the spaceport. It was a small place cluttered with engine parts and half-finished projects, but it was his, and he was happy to be home. The next morning, as he was opening the workshop doors, he found a group of kids waiting outside. Word of his adventure had reached even this small colony. "Mr. Miller," one of them said excitedly, "is it true you flew an alien ship faster than anyone ever had before?" "I had some help," Jake said, unlocking the doors. "The ship was pretty." "Amazing! Will you teach us to fly like that?" another kid asked. Jake looked at their eager faces and smiled. "I'll teach you everything I know, but remember, the most important thing about flying isn't the ship or the technology. It's learning to listen." "Listen to what?" the kids asked. "To everything," Jake said. "The wind, the engine, the ship itself. Everything has something to teach you if you know how to listen. As the kids filed into his workshop, Jake started up the old coffee maker and got ready for another day of teaching. Outside, ships took off and landed at the spaceport, carrying cargo and passengers to 1,000 different worlds. And somewhere among the stars, a beautiful black ship waited patiently for her pilot to return. Jake Miller had become a legend, but to him, he was still just a mechanic who had learned to listen to what machines were trying to say. And that, he thought, was exactly as it should be. The galaxy was a much bigger place than humans had imagined, full of wonders and challenges and friends they hadn't met yet. But they were ready for it now. They had proven they could adapt, learn, and fly with the best of them. Sometimes the best way to reach the stars was to forget you couldn't touch them.